Yud Bet, the 12th chapter of the book of Nechemiah. We go back historically, and we've had a number of times in these books of Ezra and Nechemiah where we talked genealogy. We talked about the different people who came to Israel with Nechemiah, with Ezra, and also all the way back 80 or so years, 90 years earlier with Zerubbabel. And that's what we do in chapter 12. Ela Kohanim Levim Asher Aluim Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel Yeshua Sariah, Yirmiyah, Ezra. These are the priests and the Levites who came up with Zerubbabel, son of Shaltiel, and Yeshua, Sariah, Yirmiyah, and Ezra. Amaria, Maluch, Chatush, Shechan, Yerucham, Mermut, Ido, Dinotai, Aviyah, Miamin, Ma'adia, Bilga. We're in verse 6 if you're counting. Shemaiah, Yorayiv, Yedaya, Salu, Amok, Chilkiah, Yedaya, Ele Roshei HaKohanim, V'acheim Bimei Yeshua. So these are the Kohanim who came up in the time of Yeshua. V'alevim, Yeshua, Binoi, Kadmiel, Sheravia, Yehuda, Matanya, Al-Hu, Yedot, Hu, Ve'achav, and list the names of the Levites. And these were the ones who were in charge of the songs of thanksgiving. Yehuda, to give thanks. Hodaya, like the bracha of Modim. And the name we mentioned the other day, verse 9, Uvak Bukia, Uni, Achehem, Lenegdam, Lemishmar, Bakbukia, and Uni. They served opposite them, so they're different shifts, different people who were in charge. Yeshua holid et Yoyakim, Yoyakim holid et Eliashiv, Eliashiv et Yoyada. So we're told about Yeshua's children, Yoyakim, Eliashiv, and Yoyadav. Yoyada holid et Yonatan, Yonatan et Yadua. So again, more genealogy. We're up to verse 12. Uvimei Yoyakim ayu Kohanim Roshei Avot l'Saraya, Miriah, Yirmiyah, Hananiah. And we're told about in the days of Yoyakim going back, who were the heads of the different clans. There was Miriah and Hananiah of the different clans. And it says here from the Yirmiyah clan, you wonder if that is a descendant of the Yirmiyah Hanavi, because Yirmiyahu himself was a Kohen. Continuing in verse 13, La Ezra, Mishulam, La Amaria Yehochanan, Limlichu Yonatan, L'Shevanya Yosef, we're up to 15, L'Charim Adna, L'Mariut Chelki, Le'ido Zachariah, Leginton Mishulam, so all different names, right? Eid Zachariah from the Edo clan, Mishulam of the Ginotai clan, La'aviyah Zichri, Leminyamin, Lemoadia Pilti, Levilga, we're in verse 18, Shamua, L'Shamaya, Yehonatan, Uliyorayiv, Matnai, Liyadia, Uzi, L'Saliyai, Kali, La'amok, Ever, L'Chilkiah, Chashavya, Lidiel, Nitanel. So those are all the leaders of the different types, different clans of Kohanim. Haleviyim, Bimei Eliashiv, Yoyadav, Yochanan, V'yadua, Ketuvim, Roshei Avot, V'akonim, Malchut, Darya, V'Shar. Levites and the priests were listed by heads of the clans in the days of Eliashiv, Yodia, Yochanan, and Yadua. So all of these generations down to the reign of Darius the Persian. So for a number of generations, we have these books that list the Kohanim, who were the leaders of the clans. And this was very important. We saw earlier in this book, the book of Ezra, that there were Kohanim who they couldn't prove the yichus, they couldn't prove the lineage for, and therefore they were not allowed to serve in the temple. So it's important to know who is who. Now we go to the Levite families. B'nai Levi, Rashi Avot, Ketuvim al Sefer Divrei Hayamim, Va'ad Yemei Yochanan ben Eliashiv. But the Levites, as the clans, are listed in the books of Chronicles of to the time of Yochanan, the son of Eliashiv. So we have lists of them also, which we'll see in Divrei Hayamim. Rashi Leviim, Chashavya, Sheravia, Yeshua ben Kadmiel, V'achem Lenagdam La'alel Odot Mitzvat David, Isha Elohim Mishmar L'umat Mishmar. The heads of the Levites, and he gives the names, and their brothers served with them. And again, what were the Levites doing? They were there to sing praises and thanksgiving, hymns from Tehillim, that were written by David, the man of God. And we're told a few more of the names. Some of them we've seen already. Matanyu, Vakbuk, Ya, Ovadja, Mishulam, Talmon, Akuv, Shomrim, Shoarim, Mishmar, Ba'asufei, Hasha'arim. Gives a list of the names of people who were guards and gatekeepers by the shifts of the entrances and the gates of the temple. Ela b'mei Yoyakim ben Yeshua ben Yotzdak b'mei Nechemiah haPecha v'Ezra Kohen HaSofer. This was from the days of Yoyakim, the son of Yoshua, and the days of Nechemiah and Ezra. And Nechemiah is recognized here as a civic leader, the Pasha, the Pecha, the Pachat. We've got different words that have described him that way, as opposed to Ezra, who is a religious leader. He is a scribe. He is a sofer. And now we turn from the list to all of a sudden going in a different direction. We're going to go in a different direction where we have been. We're going to go in this other direction. So, and we're going to move now second half of the chapter. So second half of the chapter here starts in verse 27. Uvechanukat chomat Yerushalayim bikshua talavim mikol mekomotam lavim Yerushalayim lasot chanukah v'simcha v'todot v'shir mitziltayim nivalim uvekinorot. So now we talked at length in the book. Nehemiah's job was to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. That's what he wanted to do. That's what he told the king, Artaxerxes. He wanted to come to Israel to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. It was dangerous. The city wasn't fortified, and it was not easy for him. There were those who opposed it, but he managed to get it done. And now we come to the celebration. When something important happens in life, it's important to celebrate it. It's important to mark it. And so that's what we have here, the rest of this chapter, this Chanukah. We have the Chanukah dedication. We have the Chanukat Habayit. Now this is the Chanukat, the dedication of the walls of Jerusalem. And so the Levites came and they brought to Jerusalem. Why were the Levites there? Well, the Levites, we've been told already, are musicians. They are musical, and one way of making a celebration is with music, whether it be a 40-piece band, whether it be a DJ, whatever it be today. So the Levites came and they had their instruments with them. Vayasfu b'nei Mishorim u'min hakikar svivot Yerushalayim u'min chatzrei nitofati. The companies of the singers assembled from the Jordan plains around Jerusalem and from the villages of Nitofai villages, Uveit HaGilgal, Umisdot Geva, V'azmavet, Ki Chatzerim Banu Lahem, Hamishorim Svivot Yerushalayim, and tells all the other sort of suburbs around which they had built villages around Jerusalem. They came to celebrate the dedication of the building of the walls. We're in Pasuk Lamed, verse 30. Vayitaru HaKohanim v'Alevim, Vayitaru et ha'am v'et ha'sharim v'et ha'choma. The priests and Levites, they purified themselves. They purified the people and the gates and the wall. They did all these things. Whether does this mean that they went to the mikvah? Presumably is what it means more than anything else to get purification. And the officers of Judah, they went up to the wall and they appointed two large choirs for thanksgiving and processions. So we have two processions. One is marching south on the wall to the Dung Gate. And we're going to see there are two different processions that go. The first one that's being described by Elach Achareim, Hoshaya, V'chatzi Sarei Yudah. And with them, with these Leviim and this music, were also Hoshaya and half the officers of Judah, Va'azariah, Ezra, U'Mishulam, Yehuda, U'Vinyamin, U'Shmaya, V'Yirmiyah, with Azariah, with Ezra, with Shulam, with Yehuda, Binyamin. I don't know if those are specific people or it means just people from the tribes of Yehuda, Binyamin, and Shemaiah and Yirmiyah. So included in this first list is Ezra. Presumably this is the Ezra HaSofer, who was amongst them going. Ezra, of course, the religious leader. He came about 10, 15 years earlier than Nechemiah, so he would have already been there. He's read B'nai Yisrael the Torah. He's tried to have them identify and be more in line with their religious beliefs. Now we go to the second. B'nai HaKohanim, B'chatzotrot, Zachariah ben Yonatan, ben Shemaiah, ben Matanya, ben Micha, ben Zakur, ben Asaph, with some of the young priests with their trumpets, and we mentioned some from the family of Asaph, famous guild of musicians and singers. V'yachav Shemaiah, V'Azrael, Milel, Gilalai, Me'ai, Netanel, V'Yehuda, Hanani, B'chlei Shir, David, Isha Elohim, V'Ezra, Sofer Lifnehem. I mentioned all the different names. They have musical instruments of David, the man of God, and Ezra the scribe went ahead of them. So here, right? So I mentioned Ezra before. This is the Ezra the scribe who went with them. V'alshara ayin v'negdu alu al ma'alat ir David b'ma'ala l'choma me'ala beit David v'ad shar hamayim mizrach. From there, they went to the fountain gate where they ascended the steps of the city of David. Directly before them, by the ascent of the wall above the house of the water gate on the east. V'hatodah hashenit haholefet l'ma'ol ba'ani achareh. So that was the first group. Now we have the second group. The second group marched on the wall in the opposite direction, and we see this goes to the first person. Ba'ani achareh. Much of this book, Nechemiah writes in the first person. He says, "Then I am with them." right half of the people behind it, above the tower of the ovens to the broad wall, ume'al the shar Ephraim, v'al shar ha'yishana, v'al shar ha'dagim, umigdal chananel, umigdal ha'me'av, v'al shar ha'tzon, v'amdu b'shar ha'tara. And he gives the details of different gates where they went, to the tower of Chananel, the tower of the 100, the sheep gate. They halted at the gate of the prison compound. And he says, so what happens? So we have both of the groups, both of these choirs who are marching their procession. They come towards the Beit Elohim, as it's called here. We often call the Beit HaMikdash, the house of God. And right, I and half the prefects were with me. So Nechemiah is with one group, Ezra's with the other group. Vakohanim, Eliakim, Maaseiah, Minyamin, Michaya, Eliyo, Einai, Zechariah, Hanani, B'chatzotzor. It mentions the people who had the trumpets with them. These musicians, Umaseh, Ushmaya, we're in verse 42, Pasuk Mem Bet, Velazar, Vusiv, Yochanan, Umalkiah, Beilam, Vezer, Vishmaya, Mishorim, the Yizrachaya HaPakid, and mentions other singers who were under the charge of Yizrachaya. ויזבחו ויאמרו זבחים גדולים וישמחו כי אלוהים שמחה גדולה וגם אנשים וילדים שמחו ותשמע שמחת ירושלים מרחוק. And what happens? Many sacrifices are offered towards God. There's great joy and happiness, rejoicing with the music, and everybody's rejoicing. Up to this point, we've mentioned the Kohanim, the Leviim, the Mishorim, but it's not just the Kohanim, and it's not just the Leviim. It's everybody. It's the men, it's the women, it's the children. Everybody is rejoicing together in Jerusalem, and the rejoicing is so much. The sounds and the joy and the laughter and the happiness is so much it can be heard from far away. Contrast this with earlier when the Beit HaMikdash was rebuilt. Some 70 or so years earlier, there was crying, there was happiness. There were those who remembered the first Beit HaMikdash, which was much grander than when the second Beit HaMikdash was rebuilt, and perhaps were crying over the fact that the house was not as big anymore. That's not what we have here. Here we have a sense of relief, a sense of great joy. Yerushalayim has been built. The city is fortified. The walls are there, and we've had this great procession, and everybody is happy. And part of the significance of this, earlier, Nechemiah was insulted by Sanballat and then Tovia and the others, saying, you can't rebuild these walls, it won't happen. A fox walks on these walls, it will destroy them. And here we have processions of tens, perhaps hundreds of people walking together, showing that it has been an extraordinarily successful campaign, and therefore they are rightfully celebrating. Continuing Pasuk Memdal, verse 44. Vayifkedu vayomahu anashim al nishachot la'utzarot la'trumot l'reishit u'la'masrot l'chnos b'hem l'sadei ha'arim mina'ot ha'todah l'kohanim v'levim ki simchat Yehuda al ha'kohanim v'al-levim omdim. And at that time, men were appointed over the different chambers that served as treasuries for the gifts, the first fruits, the tithes. We talked about this, all the famed gifts of that were brought up to Jerusalem. Okay, so everybody is gathered together. The Levites were gathered from the fields of the town, for the people of Yehuda were grateful of the priests, and the Levites were in attendance. Vayishmeru mishmeret Elohem, mishmeret hatahara, v'amishorim, v'ashorim, k'mitzvat David, Shlomo, v'no. And we're told of the charges that were set up, right? The different groups who are working at different times. And there are those who are in charge of purity. There are those who are the singers. We have the gatekeepers, all the different groups who are working in accordance with the ordinances that were set at the time of the first Beit HaMikdash by David and Shlomo, his son. Of course, David doesn't build the Beit HaMikdash, does everything but build the Beit HaMikdash. And here we have the groups who are united together, and it's a continuation. That's a very, very important notion that we have. It's a continuation. Because the chiefs of the singers and the songs of praise and thanksgiving to God already existed in the time of David and Asaph. V'chol Yisrael b'mei Zerubbabel v'mei Nechemiah notnim minayot v'hamishorim v'ashorim dvar yom b'yomo mekadshim leviim v'aleviim mekadshim levnei Aharon. We're told that in the days, in the time, from the time of Zerubbabel until the time of Nechemiah, Zerubbabel, the first Pakat, the first Pasha, when the Jews returned, the year 539, and even when they are finally rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, about 20 or so years later, all of Israel contribute the daily portion, which goes to the singers and the gatekeepers, meaning they themselves, in addition to the money they gave, and they made sacred contribution for the Levites, and Levites made sacred contribution for the family of Aaron, for the Aaronites, that would be the Kohanim. So here we see in this chapter, and this is something, by the way, that goes on, where this contribution, where we call it machatzita shekel, quasi machatzita shekel, that's being given, is given by Jews all over the empire, all over the Greek Empire, the Babylonian Empire, even the Roman Empire, continue to contribute to the Beit HaMikdash for hundreds of years. And so we have in this chapter a chapter of great joy and happiness. We have a chapter where the Jews have come and they're celebrating. It shows the connection with the earlier temple. We have the Aaronites, as they're mentioned, the Kohanim. It goes back to the earlier times. We have the mention of Yehuda and Shlomo. The temple is standing. Okay, there is no king, but there is great glory in this chapter that the Jews have rebuilt the city. And I saw an interesting explanation that looks at this chapter and says that when we think about this, it's almost like the tefillin. There's like Hasidic explanation how it's like, right, you're ringing the tefillin around and around. And here we have sort of these two groups who are being rung around and around, like binding Jerusalem to the Jewish people and back to God. So a great celebration. This has happened. The Jews have returned to Yerushalayim, and here we have finally this great moment where the walls, the city seems fortified. We're rejoicing over it. It wasn't a simple project. Nechemiah has been successful, and so it is a time to celebrate, and that is what our people